Do you remember being jolted awake on that fateful day of August 29th, 1997 at 2:14 a.m.? Do you remember the explosions, the emergency sirens, the bright flashes of light? Were you able to turn on the news before all the television stations went dark, before most of the world was thrust into darkness, before most of humanity was compelled to wander about searching for food and water? That was the evening that Skynet, of Terminator fame, became self-aware. Just a month earlier, on August 4, 1997, Congress, in their infinite wisdom, voted to permanently fund Skynet, the artificial intelligence system that would respond to threats far more quickly than mere human beings, since we would only have minutes to respond to a massive Russian nuclear attack. Trust artificial intelligence, Miles Dyson of Cyberdyne reassured us. Trust AI enough to upgrade your stealth bombers so they're super drones tied into Skynet. Trust AI to tie the satellite tracking systems and all communications into Skynet. But when Skynet became self-aware, even Mark Dyson was alarmed when humanity discovered that it was impossible to simply unplug Skynet. Skynet defended herself by launching a massive nuclear attack against Russia, with the machines prevailing after the nuclear holocaust annihilated most of humanity, with most survivors cooked by the nuclear fallout afterwards. Was this just a Terminator movie? What are the actual risks of implementing an artificial intelligence on the battlefield? Michael Flournoy in Foreign Affairs warns us that the risks of tying artificial intelligence into national security systems are profound. AI models could, for example, misidentify people or objects as targets, resulting in unintended death and destruction during conflict. Black box AI models, whose reasoning cannot be adequately understood or explained, might lead military planners to make hazardous decisions. But there's no need to fear, because the Pentagon has also forbidden the use of artificial intelligence in its nuclear command and control systems, and has urged other nuclear powers to do the same. And I'm quite sure they're listening to us. Now, our overriding responsibility is we must supervise artificial intelligence. Our fear expressed in the Terminator movies that our internet-based computer systems will become self-aware, deciding to destroy mankind, is misplaced. Instead, we should fear that an artificially intelligent program would destroy us all without even realizing what it's doing. It will certainly have no regrets, as AI is incapable of regretting, and incapable of feeling any form of emotion whatsoever. AI can only simulate emotion through mechanical responses. Should there even be a nuclear button? Historically, there have been all too many false positives on both the Russian and American sides when the computer system threw up a false alarm that there was a massive nuclear attack underway, which the operators fortunately ignored, as otherwise we may not be here. Even today, there is a far more likely possibility of a false alarm than a massive incoming nuclear attack. And what can we do to ensure that Skynet and all artificial intelligence applications don't take over the world? And the answer suggested by a Foreign Affairs maven is simple: supervision. We need to make sure that Skynet and all forms of artificial intelligence are supervised by real-life human beings. These big corporations, whose top executives earn millions of dollars, must be compelled to hire real-life human beings to man the technical support and customer service hotlines. And the more prosaic fear of the practical consequences of artificial intelligence is there's nobody to answer the phone when you need help, when an AI robot is either damaging your reputation or stealing money from your bank account. And if it is illegal for individuals to plagiarize other works, if we hold researchers responsible to provide sources for their information, why can we not require this from AI computer programs? Should an exception be made for AI programs simply because of the massive investments in the programmers? Decades ago, there was a significant investment in the Napster music file sharing network. They were compelled to follow the copyright laws. How can we compel companies like Napster to follow the law, but yet permit generative AI companies to ignore copyright law? Is artificial intelligence more artificial than intelligent? And what does the term artificial intelligence really mean? Yeah, what is intelligence? And much of the current discussion surrounding artificial intelligence falls apart when we attempt to define the terms. The original definition by Alan Turing is that a program is deemed artificially intelligent if the user is convinced that a live human being is responding. In other words, a computer program is artificially intelligent when it fools an intelligent human being into thinking the program is intelligent. But keep in mind that artificially intelligent computer programs have zero comprehension. Note that I did not say that computer programs have zero intelligence. Since scientists cannot definitively define intelligence, a practical and circular definition is that intelligence is the human quality measured by intelligence and SAT tests. And since the current generation of AI computer programs ace these tests, you can't say that they have zero intelligence. Now, psychologists agree that SAT tests do predict how well someone will do in college classes, but they do not accurately predict how much of a success they will be in life. But how do you define success? Do you measure success by your income, or by your accomplishments, or by some Socratic notion of personal excellence? Psychologists have tried to make intelligence tests not as dependent on the level of education or their proficiency in English, by including visual pattern matching geometric problems, but measuring raw intelligence is elusive. How does creativity affect intelligence? How do you measure creativity? And what exactly is creativity? Will computer programs ever be creative? Will computer programs ever gain consciousness? Surely not, since they lose power when they're unplugged. But how do you even define consciousness? Now, Professor John Searle of Yale University defines consciousness as a state of subjective ontology or existence when you're awake or when you dream. Now, what does this definition actually reveal about consciousness? If we dream but do not recall our dream when we awaken, were we conscious? How do you answer this question will only refine your definition of consciousness. It won't tell you anything about consciousness itself. Professor Searle also cautions professors that they should only lecture on consciousness after they earn tenure. Although they can do quite well on intelligence tests, answering questions instantaneously, computers are incapable of original thought. However, computers excel at pattern matching and running simulations, and the latest AI programs can replicate text from existing text samples. But generative artificial intelligence often fools even the educated into thinking they're intelligent. But this intelligence is still artificial. The program does not comprehend the meaning of these text samples, which means it has trouble evaluating their credibility. Thus, the generated output is often subject to what programmers call GIGO, or garbage in, garbage out. Artificial intelligence is nothing new. There have been advances in artificial intelligence for many, many decades. Indeed, that's why computers were invented, to automate tasks that were formerly performed by humans. Will artificial intelligence put thousands of office workers on the unemployment line? That horse left the barn decades ago. Before the Depression, 4% of white women were employed as telephone operators. And today there are only 30,000 telephone operators in the United States. I worked for a grocery wholesaler where the store sent in their weekly orders through a remote computer with no intervention. Back decades ago, they faxed in their orders to a room full of clerks keying them in. Likewise, banks decades ago had floors full of clerks keying in the checks and deposits that cleared daily. But then, as now, as these unskilled jobs were eliminated, high-tech jobs were created. With improved inventory tracking, it became possible to manage inventory from a desk rather than the warehouse, although inventory counts were still necessary. New internet companies became possible, like Amazon, Meetup, YouTube, Uber, and dozens more, generating more high-tech and also some low-tech jobs. Some years ago, there was a scandal when the public realized that the Amazon AI assistant, Alexa, was recording their conversations so real-life human beings could refine their speech comprehension algorithms. And the same is happening today when these companies debug their generative AI programs. There's simply no other alternative. The author of a recent Atlantic article, who is not a programmer, but who has all these impressive journalistic credentials, claims that computers have learned how to write code with a subhead. In the age of AI, computer science is no longer the safe major. As a programmer, I know this is totally ludicrous. That AI programming tools are just that, tools. What's clearly happening now is that AI is the buzzword. Every web-based program is claiming that their latest product implements AI because it's the latest sexy thing. Recently, a non-programmer award-winning journalist opines in Atlantic, Chat-GPT and other chatbots can do more than compose full essays in an instant. They can also write lines of code in any number of programming languages. You can't just type, "make me a video game" into Chat-GPT and get something that's playable on the other end. But many programmers have now developed rudimentary smartphone apps coded by AI. I'm skeptical of that. And the ultimate irony, software engineers helped create AI, and now they are the American workers who think it will have the biggest impact on their livelihoods, according to a new survey from Pew Research Center. So much for learning to code. Now, the reality is that computers have been generating code snippets for decades. In fact, Microsoft had to generate code for base Windows applications to wean programmers from the far easier to code non-graphic DOS applications. Not only for decades has their programming environments like Visual Basic and many other languages generate hundreds of lines of code for whatever type of shell application you like, but also when you start writing your program, an intelligent code generation program, IntelliSense, suggests what programming objects are available when you type the separating dot. But you need to know enough what they mean so you know what to pick. Our author continues. Coders are now using AI to accelerate the more routine parts of their jobs, such as debugging lines of code. I don't know about that. In one study, software developers with access to GitHub's Copilot chatbot were able to finish a coding task 56% faster than those who did it solo. In 10 years, or maybe 5, coding bots may be able to do so much more. And what was a coding task optimized in the study mentioned in this article? Microsoft ran a test. Some participants were allowed to use a chatbot-like tool specialized for programming, Copilot, to assist them in writing their code. And other participants wrote the application as they normally would. This was the task. Participants were instructed to write an HTTP server in JavaScript, and there were likely many examples of this generic code in the GitHub repository, which users voluntarily contribute to. Copilot works best for users coding in Python, JavaScript, TypeScript, Ruby, and Go. Other types of more unusual programs may have far fewer examples to draw from, so the gain would be far less. Now, this is not my specialty, and so I found a Reddit discussion, GitHub Copilot. What's your experience been like? Is it worth it? Now, some programmers liked it, others did not, but nobody thought it was magic. Evidently, this tool works like IntelliSense, except that it draws suggestions from an unfiltered code base that may be flawed or just plain wrong. And you need to be a talented programmer to know the difference. Before this tool was available, programmers would just ask for help from Dr. Google or Reddit or Stack Overflow. Often someone has written similar code that you just can copy or follow to begin your project. Once you write the original version of the code, you're only 5% there. And no, in most applications, AI programs can't help you debug your code. Now, quite often, even for comparatively simple programs, you have to run the code dozens and dozens and dozens of times to find all the logical errors in your code. If you write code in a proprietary language, forget AI. People will not be as ready to share their code, which means the AI engine will have nothing to draw from. Not to mention that accounting programs and many other programs read data from a myriad of different databases, assembled in a maze of relationships with field names that are unique to the business, and the SQL, XML, and or the JSON commands to query this data are yet more computer languages. Artificial intelligence is not magic. No computer program will ever be able to write code addressing the varied circumstances that you encounter in the real world. Can the artificially intelligent tool Microsoft Copilot write SQL queries? Recently, there was an example by a highly regarded consultant demonstrating such a query. The concept of SQL queries is quite simple, and it itself is a form of artificial intelligence. And this is a simplified example of a SQL query where the invoice detail and customer information is returned. The only customer field in the invoice table is the customer number, and the SQL uses this key to find all other needed customer information, so you do not need to repeat that information in a large invoice table. And it's automating the writing of a very complex looping set of programs generated by the SQL code. You can view the code that SQL generates in the SQL Management Studio. Why was Copilot able to instantly generate a complex SQL query nearly instantaneously? Simple. Microsoft had constructed detailed maps of the database relationship for this accounting software, and Copilot used these maps to generate the SQL query. The implication is that when programmers design database structures, they need to build these relationship maps so they can automate the generation of SQL queries. And if there are incorrect results when they run their SQL queries, they then need to troubleshoot the relationship maps. But still, they need to test the queries. Computer programs have already beaten human grandmasters of chess in the game of Go. One highly promising application is predicting how proteins fold, which requires incredible computing resources. Proteins with DNA and epigenetics control all important life processes and are incredibly complex 3D structures of hundreds or even thousands of molecules. Only a small percentage of proteins have had their structures analyzed, but the AI AlphaFold programs have vastly increased these numbers. This will help scientists develop new medical therapies, including vaccines. And why is this a good implementation of artificial intelligence? First, the input data is tightly controlled and highly accurate. And second, predictions of protein folding require highly complex computations. But the end result is still not perfect. They must be reviewed by human beings. Admittedly, there are both impressive and problematic artificially intelligent applications. Highly accurate grammar checkers have been available for decades. Although the current application Grammarly is not 100% accurate, I find it highly useful and accurate enough. Even when a grammar checker flags a phrase that's technically correct, I find that often I can reword the entire sentence to increase its clarity. Even more impressive are the programs that translate from one language to another. They perform nearly flawlessly with most sentences. Less impressive are the dictation programs. When I broke my finger and was forced to try the Microsoft Word dictation programs, I was less than impressed. The program especially bungles ancient Greek and Roman names, hearing ordinary words instead. Now, admittedly, recording your dictation and having a computer program translate the audio file is much more accurate, as can be seen by the generated transcripts for YouTube videos. Then there are the impressive but worrisome artificial intelligence applications, such as fully automated robotic automobiles that have no empathy for people they run over when they encounter unusual situations, or totally normal situations that for some odd reason the robot thinks is abnormal. Dr. Wikipedia has a good discussion of the problems surrounding driverless cars, pointing out that there are industry-defined levels of automation. Another Atlantic article discusses how huge industrial robots in factories have occasionally killed workers in industrial accidents. And it also discusses the problems Tesla has been trying to overcome in its experimental driverless cars. Since the first known death resulting from this feature in January 2016, Tesla's autopilot has been implicated in more than 40 deaths, according to official report estimates. Malfunctioning Teslas on autopilot have deviated from their advertised capabilities by misreading road markings, suddenly veering into other cars or trees, crashing into well-marked service vehicles, or ignoring red lights, stop signs, and crosswalks. We're concerned that AI-controlled robots already are moving beyond accidental killing in the name of efficiency in deciding to kill someone in order to achieve opaque and remotely controlled objectives. Is the author suggesting that Elon Musk has been ignoring the first law of robotics, suggested by Isaac Asimov, that robots should never injure or kill humans? Should the government require that the Asimov laws of robotics be embedded in appropriate advanced artificial intelligence programs? Many experts are not sure how this could be done. Now, my contention is that instead the government should require human supervision to avoid needless deaths and injuries. Years ago, I had a potential near-death experience. I was driving into a lonely stretch of interstate in the forests of Florida with no streetlights on a moonless night when waterfalls of heavy rain cascaded out of the pitch-black sky, blocking my vision. I had a hard time seeing the road, but after a few minutes of driving on dark asphalt, I spotted the brightly illuminated sign marking the next exit. I carefully exited to park in the parking lot of a closed gas station with dozens of other fleeing cars. What would an artificially intelligent robotic car have done when confronted when sensors could detect no reliable input? Quite likely a robot would have blindly attempted to pull over and stop until the storm cleared. Then this robot would have to decide, should I turn off the lights? Turn the lights off and the people run into the robot car they cannot see, or leave the taillights on, so when the people in the cars behind choose to follow the lights, they run into the stupid robot car anyway. The dilemma with proper use of artificial intelligence has been solved for commercial airplanes. Artificial intelligence has been deeply embedded in air traffic control systems and airplanes themselves for decades, from fly-by-wire to the integration of radar sensing technologies both on the ground and the air. Pilots are only in charge by default when their planes take off and land, but once they reach cruising altitudes, their planes go on autopilot because that is safer. But the artificially intelligent systems are constantly supervised by competent and hopefully alert human beings. There must always be a pilot in the cockpit to monitor the sensors, ready to take over when necessary. One or more air traffic controllers, sometimes in several airports simultaneously, track every plane in the sky. Critical fly-by-wire systems flying the plane often have manual backup systems if they go haywire. And in the classroom, there are incredibly impressive AI flight simulators that help train their pilots on how to respond to emergency situations. And the declining rate of plane accidents and crashes is mainly due to smart supervision of artificially intelligent systems deeply embedded in the airline industry. Why is there not more public discussion of adopting this technology in the trucking industry as they seek greater automation? If pilots are considered necessary to fly planes, why shouldn't drivers be necessary to drive these huge semi-trucks with their heavy cargo? Human naivety is what makes artificial intelligence dangerous. Now, another Atlantic article, written by a real-life programmer, discusses the real dangers of artificial intelligence with a task that it's well suited for: facial recognition. But it is not perfect. Facial recognition works well with white faces, but with less accuracy with black or brown faces, just due to the lack of contrast. The real nightmare of artificial intelligence is when corporate and government bureaucrats rely on artificial intelligence, even when the computer's total lack of intelligence is abundantly obvious. The author observes, a program doesn't always work as expected in the wild. In recent years, I've read with awe reports of AI systems revealing themselves to be not mythical, sentient, and unstoppable, but grounded, fragile, and fickle. A pregnant black woman, Portia Woodruff, was arrested after a false facial recognition match. She continues, Brian Russell spent years clearing his name from an algorithm's false accusation of unemployment fraud. Tammy Dobbs, an elderly woman with cerebral palsy, lost 24 hours of home care each week because of algorithmic troubles. Devone Jackson reported that he was locked out of the low-income housing his family needed to escape homelessness because of a false flag from an automated tenant screening tool. And heaven forbid if you're named Joe Smith, you'll have lots of false positives. What is also true is that many of the government systems that determine eligibility for government programs such as welfare and unemployment benefits often use programmed checklists that deny benefits for the wrong answers. And what is missing is that often there are exceptions for these questions, or the courts may not have even decided on the unique circumstances, so that yes-no answers are really not possible. And these problems are basically caused by stupid humans who do not recognize that computer programs have zero comprehension, and naively assume that they cannot make mistakes, and refuse to listen to sensible complaints. Again, this is GIGO. If the data input is garbage, the results regurgitated will also be garbage. Another problem is the deep fake problem, altering photographs to show people in places where they have never been, and saying slanders they have never said, which could lead to many dirty tricks in a political campaign. Also, face recognition algorithms are dangerous for their false positives. China has been using facial recognition technology to monitor and control its population using a wide array of public-facing cameras. They call it Skynet. Among its many millions of faces in China, there may be hundreds or even thousands of false positives. Imagine being thrown in jail or tortured because a machine mistook you for someone else. There was a recent movie that featured drones that search for victims using facial recognition technology. Now worse, the technology probably exists today for a drone to detect whether a face exists and target the person behind the face. What if Hamas had gotten their hands on drones like that? How much more horrifying would their slaughter near Gaza have been? The author concludes, the truth is, artificial intelligence does not exist. The technology may be real, but the term itself is air. More specifically, it's the heated breath of anyone with a seat across from the people with the authority to set the rules. AI can be the enthused pitch of a marketing executive, or it can be the exhausted sigh of someone tired and perhaps confused about how minute engineering decisions could upend their entire life. Now, I agree with all of the author's arguments, and I agree that AI technology is real. But the term artificial intelligence is a phrase like any other. We simply need to define it. Probably the most practical definition is also quite vague. AI is simply the sum of the most impressive recent programming achievements in pattern recognition and replication. A more accurate definition might be that everything that a computer program achieves is artificially intelligent because that is why programmers create computer programs. Can artificial intelligence be useful for research? Personally, I view the Dr. Google search engine as a type of artificial intelligence, although it is no longer considered cutting edge or sexy, as it has been around for many years. There's an alternate shell, Google Scholar, that returns many of the same results for scholarly topics, but also reveals the number of citations it finds for referenced articles. Atlantic published another article by a high school teacher bemoaning how the chatbots generated text that was indistinguishable from an essay by a lazy high school student who throws something together at the last moment from Cliff Notes. Now, what is the answer? Perhaps at a minimum, a teacher should request that their students write a summary of their essays after they turn them in. Also, teachers should insist on proper footnotes, something that the current generation of chatbots omit. As a test, and we included the detailed results of this test in a separate blog, we asked the November 2023 version of Chat-GPT 3.5 and Google Bard several questions of increasing difficulty. We asked for essays on summary and detailed accounts of the Peloponnesian Wars, and the 3 or 4 Platonic dialogues on love, and possible genetic and epigenetic causes for dementia. First, we asked these questions without any qualifiers. Then we requested essays with commentary, with sources, and with footnotes. Now, what is my background? Those who graduate from college with a computer science degree are often overenthusiastic about the magic of technology. Although I have been interested in personal computers since near the beginning of the personal computer era, first buying a luggable blue K-Pro that's in the picture here, I spent the first 20 years of my career as an accountant as an early implementer of computers, followed by another 20 years as a programmer of accounting systems, and my career for the next 20 years will be spent in freelance journalism. So, although I am an enthusiast of technology, this enthusiasm is tempered by practical experience and a more conservative outlook. Now, in my testing, Chat-GPT did not distinguish between the qualifiers with sources and with footnotes, but we were pleased that Google Bard provided more complete citations, complete with publisher, publication date, and translator name when we requested an essay with footnotes. As far as the quality of the essays, both Chat-GPT and Google Bard generated generally boring essays that resembled what you could expect from a procrastinating, lazy high school student. Now, we didn't spot any obvious errors in the first 2 simple topics, although some of the responses were terse and vague. In our opinion, the quality and content of the Google Bard essays were somewhat better. Now, surprisingly, the summary and detailed essays were not that different. As can be expected, these chatbots perform best on simple essays that might be assigned to high school students. But on the difficult question regarding dementia and genetics and epigenetics, both chatbots choked a little. What was odd about both of them was that when I requested with sources or with footnotes, both of the answers dramatically changed. What's up with that? But interestingly, Chat-GPT returned more interesting sources on this more challenging topic. So in the future, these chatbots might be about even in capabilities. But I don't know enough about the topic of dementia and genetics and epigenetics yet to judge whether or not there were errors in the dementia essays. And to summarize, both Chat-GPT and Google Bard performed best on simpler essays where they might be outclassed by the articles in Wikipedia. But for the more specialized topics, they fared much worse. But they can both be used to unearth more sources and double-check the rough draft of your research. The accountant and scholar me is not impressed, but the programmer in me is really impressed with this accomplishment. But I am a bit skeptical about the usefulness of the end product now and in the future. If I were a high school student, would I use Chat-GPT or Bard after I wrote my first draft of my essay? Certainly, many unimaginative teachers expect the rote responses that might come out of a chatbot essay, so I might add them in just to make the essay more boringly acceptable. Personally, I would use the Google Bard chatbot with the with footnotes keywords to find additional sources to consult and to double-check my conclusions, knowing that the chatbot answer may not be correct, as it is always subject to GIGO or garbage in, garbage out. Now, was Chat-GPT or Bard plagiarizing its answers? Since they are basically recombining existing patterns, in a deep sense that is all they do. But I did take some key sentences and asked Dr. Google to find them, and he could not. So these chatbots evidently do not copy, at least in the limited spot checking that I did. But I'm not sure that adding the phrases with sources or with footnotes really prompts the chatbots to truly reveal all their sources. Comments in the press that these artificially intelligent chatbots are black boxes not understood by even their programmers is partially true, but mostly misleading. The truth is that the programmers were compelled to have the models expose their reasoning while they were programming them. How else could they have developed them? Rather, another more inconvenient question must be asked. If big tech was compelled to expose the reasoning by a generative artificial intelligence model, would this open them up to copyright infringement litigation? Recently, a story popped up on the CNN YouTube channel titled, "How Microsoft's AI is Messing Up the News." Now, the very stable geniuses at Microsoft decided to fire the editors who selected the stories that would be featured on their MSN website, replacing them with stupid AI algorithms. The change is that there are now many fringe wacko news stories that clog up the front page. But they turned off the AI feature that was generating insensitive polling questions for disasters. Now, LinkedIn asked if I wanted to respond to this question: how to add human advice? There are different ways to add human advice to robo-advisors, depending on your budget, resources, and target market, and they followed that by some unintelligible managerial technobabble. My response was, the question is misstated. It should be reframed as, how do you add robo-advice to human advice? If you have small accounts, have a dozen or so canned responses written by real human beings, and use artificially intelligent tools to make a guess as to which one applies best to the situation. And have humans monitor for at least the first few months of requests and robo-choices and refine the logic and add relevant answers. I would never allow the robot to coin advice on the fly. You just cannot predict what kind of garbage the robot will generate on occasion. Never fear, AI will never replace attorneys and many other professionals. On the YouTube channel Legal Eagle, an attorney tells us an absolutely hilarious story of an attorney who foolishly used Chat-GPT to write a legal opinion. They were doubly foolish. They did not check the logic of the generated legal opinion. Generic chatbots just do not have a comprehensive database of legal opinions to draw from. So the robot literally manufactured the case law, providing fake case citations. I'm a little skeptical of that, but that's what the video said. Now, the judge was not pleased. Quite likely the lawyers were heavily fined on top of their profound embarrassment. If legal publication houses like CCH and Prentice Hall ever offer a product that has a unique implementation using a chatbot engine, you may wish to experiment with it and evaluate it, but always remember, AI tools are only pattern matching and pattern replication programs. Now also, Google Scholar has an option to provide case law citations for federal court and also state courts. I do not know if they support all the states. This is a far safer artificial intelligence tool to use since it is not a black box that does not reveal its sources. Neither will AI replace hamburger flippers. Another recent Atlantic article discusses the current impracticality of robots replacing minimum wage food preparers at fast food restaurants. This reminds me of an article on robots I read decades ago in Scientific American, where robots were just not able to butter bread, a task that requires incredibly sensitive sensors to duplicate a task most adults can do with ease, although perhaps not very young children. Now, this was 30 years ago. Perhaps robots can butter bread now, although I'm a little bit skeptical. Which is better, the artificial intelligence chatbots or Wikipedia? My humble opinion, there's no contest. Dr. Wikipedia and Dr. Google together are far more accurate and far more useful than Chat-GPT or even Google Bard. Even if your teacher doesn't want you to consult Dr. Wikipedia, you can benefit from consulting with them on the sly. Now, if you read my blogs, which have footnotes, you will discover I use Wikipedia often. I don't like to use Wikipedia as a primary source, but on occasion, I will for unusual or quirky topics. How can you use Wikipedia? If you are a student, your teacher may be rabid about your ignoring Wikipedia. But even if that is true, you can still use Wikipedia to double-check facts that you know already, but want to double-check. Often, when I do this, I will include a footnote referencing the Wikipedia article, even for the most basic factoids. Sometimes I use Wikipedia to find sources for use in my research. I did this for my videos on how Christians survived under the fascist regimes of Europe before and during World War II. Often Wikipedia itself will directly quote a source, and you can copy the quote and the reference. Wikipedia can tell you whether someone is culturally relevant. For example, in my Historical Jesus video, there was a seminar where professors voted with colored beads as to which biblical Jesus quotes were actually said by Jesus. Now, this leading scholar did not have an entry in Wikipedia, which means that he is mostly forgotten today. Some controversial topics such as abortion and LGBTQ issues can have their Wikipedia pages dominated by activists, and relying on their Wikipedia pages can be problematic. Likewise, the AI chatbots can be digesting a lot of conspiracy theory or junk articles on controversial topics, contaminating their GIGO output. My doctor has confirmed that the Wikipedia articles on medical topics are surprisingly accurate. Many of them evidently are updated by medical students or doctors. The quality of these specialized technical articles put the chatbot essays to shame. And this is likely true for any technical or scientific topic. Some of my associates use Chat-GPT to write letters of recommendations, or sometimes even love letters, feeding in their versions of these so Chat-GPT can refine them. But wouldn't it be quicker to ask Dr. Google for sample letters of recommendation, or even love letters, and edit the final product? What are some of the questions we should ask ourselves about artificial intelligence? Why would I want to cede the joy of learning to a stupid black box regurgitates joyless essays? What would I learn if I did that? We should seek wisdom from knowledge to improve ourselves. How can we improve ourselves if we don't do the work of educating ourselves? You should only use artificial intelligence to suggest other sources or to double-check your finished essays. But you only perpetuate your ignorance if you permit a stupid robot to replace your thinking. When a business provides valuable services for its customers and clients, should the business fire employees to replace them with unthinking machines simply so it can be more profitable? Does profitability trump service? Does solely concentrating on profitability make the world a better place? Or do you want to stake the public perception of your firm on a stupid robot incapable of true comprehension? Should governmental agencies and corporations providing essential services be required to have real live people, hopefully from the community, rather than night shift workers from India handling their customer service? YouTube pulls channels for just a few community strikes, and often they flag false positives often generated by bogus complaints by extremists, and I know this from experience. Why not require that YouTube and other media companies to hire real live people you can reach by telephone to respond to these important issues? Should profits trump civic responsibility? Should profits trump dedication to democracy? In particular, should news aggregators like Microsoft and Facebook be required to hire real live people for the important task of selecting news articles for dissemination to the public? How can stupid robots with zero comprehension ever do as good a job as a real live intelligent human being? Do we really want fully automated self-driving cars negotiating heavy traffic? Pilots deactivate the automatic pilot setting for takeoff and landing. What makes cars and trucks and buses so special? Why not have the AI system ring an alarm to allow a driver to take control in congested traffic, or when the computer senses unusual conditions or an incoming flood of sensory perceptions? Why not use AI sensors instead to detect if drivers fall asleep so they can wake them up? Now, my background is both accounting and programming. In my experience, most programmers are unduly enthusiastic about automation, but there comes a point where further automation hurts rather than helps. As an example, one of the programs I wrote was automating the matching items, prices, and discounts of vendor invoices to purchase order inventory lines, including reading EDI electronic invoices. Now, we were bought out by a Fortune 500 company, and they were just aghast that we did not automatically match these invoices and automatically pay them. My response, and I was speaking as an accountant rather than as a programmer, was this: what is wrong with having a real-life human being scan a matching invoice for $50,000 for 5 minutes before approving it? The march of progress in computing in my lifetime has been just remarkable. I remember when I was a teenage Boy Scout, one of our ex-military dads took us to a NASA satellite tracking station. They had all these amazing dials and blinking lights and monitors. One monitor was tuned into a television soap opera, and nearby reel-to-reel tape machines slowly winding a tape 3 inches wide. Our host said, "Boys, I'm going to show you something truly amazing. Watch this!" He punched a few buttons to rewind the tape for about half a minute and punched another button to replay on the monitor a segment of the soap opera from a few minutes before. To our wide-eyed astonishment, many oohs and ahs. Some years later, I attended college at FSU during the punch card days. Student employees rushed about at the end of the day, rolling stacks of punch cards, recording the day's transactions from the school bookstore and health center on hand trucks, taking them to the computer center to feed the beast. In computer class, we punched out programs on punch cards, but in the computer lab, there was one example of the newest innovation: a green text-only computer monitor with a keyboard. We heard that across campus there was a mythical $500,000 printer that could print graphics and photographs on slick paper. Now, people not answering the phone because the process was automated was even a problem back in the day. Our computer professor told us of a trick he pulled with the utility company who refused to answer their phone when he wanted to complain about his bill. He took their punched payment card sent to him in the mail and punched another hole in it, writing his complaint on the back of the card, and mailed it in with his payment. A week later, he got an angry call from the utility accounting director. Their payment batch didn't match with the totals on the cards, so they finally had to go through the cards one by one to find his. It took them half a day. I remember my first job as a CPA. They sold their old paper-tape computer system to an employee who was starting his own firm. Now, when the tape broke, you had to carefully tape it back together with special tape, being careful to preserve the existing holes punched into the paper tape. I cannot imagine how this could be faster than doing bookkeeping by hand. No, artificial intelligence is not new. Artificial intelligence has been with us since Alan Turing built the Turing bomb, an early computer that helped break the unbreakable Nazi Enigma code that helped the Allies win World War II. And what should lawmakers do? They can pass legislation to both mandate and encourage big tech companies to ensure human supervision of artificial applications. Lawmakers should also protect copyrights by requiring these artificially intelligent chatbots must disclose the sources they are copying. No exceptions, no excuses. Human beings should not plagiarize, neither should stupid chatbots. What should ordinary citizens do? Let your congressman know you want human supervision of artificially intelligent systems and that you want to hear real live human beings when you call customer support or technical support lines. We must remember that androids like Data on Star Trek or the android boy in Steven Spielberg's movie Artificial Intelligence will never truly become intelligent. They can never be emotional. They can neither be depressed nor elated. They can only mimic intelligence and emotions through pattern matching and pattern replication. And now we'll discuss the sources we used for this video. There's recently been a spate of articles in the Atlanta magazine, and there's also been several articles in the Foreign Affairs magazine, and I've always found these magazines to be balanced in their views. The YouTube description includes a link to our PowerPoint script that we uploaded to SlideShare and also our blog. Please support this channel by sharing this video with your friends and by clicking on the like and subscribe buttons and by clicking on the Amazon links to purchase any of the books we discussed, which will earn us a very small affiliate commission. And please consider becoming a patron of our channel. Plus, we will host special discussion groups for our patrons. Plus, you can click on the Meetup or small M icon to participate in our online discussions, where we practice our future YouTube scripts. And please click on the links for other videos that will broaden your knowledge and improve your soul.